a few years ago, I broke up with my girlfriend, and we'd been together for a really long time. We met when we were teenagers, and we'd been together for like our entire adult lives. So I'd never been single before as an adult, and I'm not very like tall or good looking or anything. I don't have any money, and I didn't have any friends at the time, and also I live in a foreign country, and probably the main thing I do have is kind of like the gift of the gab, like I can be funny and interesting and stuff, but that kind of gets lost when you're like foreign and speaking at a sort of A2, B1 level, which I was probably a bit higher than that at the time, but not much higher than that. So I certainly wasn't like the kind of sexy foreigner stereotype, and so it was a pretty bad time for me. I'm sure like a lot of men can relate to having very bad experiences on dating apps. Obviously, I think even sort of above average men, like in terms of looks and status and stuff, like struggle with that because there's just so many men on there. But certainly if you're like at least from a superficial perspective a relatively average or below average chap, then yeah, it's pretty terrible. So yeah, I was having all of these bad experiences, and I was like really lonely and unhappy, and I would have these sort of rejections or setbacks, and it would really hurt me. And I would get like very, very depressed. And at night, I remember just being like every night, I would just like, particularly when I was smoking weed, like I quit quite early on during the breakup because I was like, this isn't going to work. Smoking weed at this point in my life, like this is just horrible. But I would get stoned, and then I'd go to bed and like just be hit with like a flood of just pain. Like it's just suffering and pain, just like emotional pain, shame. And I mean, like for a lot of people, I think that kind of loneliness and rejection and stuff is quite normal, but I've been kind of sheltered from that. I've been sort of sheltered from the reality of it by being in a relationship for so long, and that had its own kind of pain associated with it, like hence why we broke up. We were suffering quite badly, but it did shelter me from this other kind of pain, of the feeling of kind of failure and rejection and I mean, not entirely, because even when we were together, like there were times when we kind of sort of were broken up, or times when we things were very bad, and also there's just you kind of get a bit of a feeling of your place in the world and how other people see you, certainly. And I always felt like bad about that. I always felt like women don't like me and stuff, and from childhood onwards, I always felt like really bad about that. It was always a source of like feelings of rejection and discomfort. And anyway, yeah, so this was going on for a little while, and then at a certain point, I guess I had this kind of determination to change things. And at a certain point, I decided on a new strategy, which was, instead of trying to like get dates with women or whatever, I decided that my strategy would be to try and get rejected once a day by a woman. And not to try and get rejected once a day by a woman, but that was my minimum quota. So I wasn't trying to get rejected, but basically I decided that until I'd been rejected that day by a woman, sort of romantic sense, a dating sense, I hadn't fulfilled my obligations for the day. That was like my task for every day. And it really changed things. It really freed up my mind in a way, because it became this kind of annoying thing that I had to do. Like I kind of wanted to go and do other shit, and I'd be like, oh, I have to like approach a woman, or like message a woman, or like, ask someone out on a date. I have to do this, otherwise the day's not done. And it took the sting out of it, and it made it oddly into a kind of accomplishment. You know, when I'd done it, I was like, cool, I've done that for the day. And it was sort of empowering. It made me feel it made me feel a lot less bad about when it did happen, because I felt like this was built into the process, and it was I was kind of assuming that this would happen a certain amount, and that was just unavoidable, and that was part of the process. And then in the end, it ended up working out quite well. Like, I went on quite a few dates with women, and like a couple of them were women who would not have looked at me on a dating app, like, at all, not even for a second. You know, like women who were, again, from a superficial perspective, I don't have a low value of myself as myself, you know, as a person, like, but I do understand, in a kind of like superficial world and everything, and the world of like modern dating and stuff, I do understand kind of what my sort of position is, you know, certainly after all that time being single in the past. And yeah, so some of these women I was able to like approach and speak to and go out with were like not women you'd expect I'd be able to go on dates with, basically. And part of that, I think, is because I sort of because I removed my fear of the outcome. Like, because when I was approaching all of these things thinking, okay, this should be successful, if I, like, for example, I started just like, I would just go up to women and talk to them, like, and I never was like, you know, harassing anyone or anything. I would just go up and be like, hi, how you doing, whatever. And if they didn't want to chat, I would just go away. But I would just try to be friendly and strike up conversation. It's a bit, you know, to be honest, when you're slightly like odd, like bald guy dressed in all black and stuff, it's a bit harder to be like kind of fun and friendly, you know, when you're not with anyone. And I'm not like a kind of like, I don't have the appearance or demeanor of like a kind of super chill, like kind of hippie-ish guy or whatever. So it was a bit harder from that point of view. I had to be like quite friendly and disarming. And I think during some of this, I may have had my dog. I don't remember if I had my dog at this stage, but anyway, I would just approach women and like talk to them or whatever. And most of the time, they're just sort of like, they don't normally say go away directly, but like they basically say, you know, go away or whatever. Or you just get the feeling, and I'd be like, all right, see you later. You know, I'm off. Have a nice day or whatever. And then it became like, even then what would happen was I would think like, well, I have to get my one for the day. And so I would then do very bold, you know, women who are like really attractive. I'd be like, fuck it, why not? You know, and then it's done. Then I can go home and like forget about this. And so I would try this. And yeah, anyway, it didn't lead to anything more than just some very casual, not casual sex. It didn't even need sex. I don't even mean that. I mean just casual, like not even casual interest. I don't know the word, but basically, like, I went out on like one date with a couple of women and whatever, and a couple of women gave me their number, and then I didn't reply, whatever. But it was definitely a lot more successful than before, when I'd been going into this with like the idea of like, this must be successful, and if it isn't, something is wrong. So I changed my approach, and I didn't try. It's a subtle but important distinction. I wasn't trying to fail. I was accepting that there is some level of failure built into this process. Like, I will fail a certain amount of times, and that's just going to be part. Even if, for example, I mean, if you did that and you got like rejected like 10 times and accepted once, like that would be a very high rate of success. Like that would be like a really, really high rate of success. Even for, well, it depends how good looking you are, but even for like quite good looking guys, I think generally that's the case. And a lot of guys like will it's a thing like black guys tend to do more. Like they refer to it as like the numbers game, where it's basically, if you approach enough women and speak to enough women on a huge, you know, just do it all the time, after a certain number of attempts, like you'll probably have some success in there just by weight of probability. And I certainly noticed this, like living in London. Black guys would just go up to women all the time, like constantly. And whenever like a girl I knew was like approached by guys in the street, it was always a black guy. And they, of course, not all black guys do this, but like a lot of them seem to just have a kind of imperviousness to rejection. Like they didn't really care. They'd just be like, okay. And it was just part of, I guess, like their feelings weren't so tied up in it, and it was just part of the process. Like, yeah, you just X amount of times you will fail at this. And there's a whole bunch of different questions about, like, particularly nowadays, everything's changed, and it's like, should you approach people and speak to strangers and whatever? Is that appropriate? I don't know, whatever. That's a whole separate issue, but yeah, I think that entirely depends on like how you do it and how you approach people and where and when and stuff like that, in terms of making sure people don't feel like, cornered or whatever. So anyway, so by changing how I thought about things, this isn't to say that this suddenly became like this radical success and I was like, my life was suddenly amazing. But immediately it became that my emotional pain around this was substantially lessened. It became a kind of funny thing to me. It became sort of funny, and I it was like taking cold showers. This rejection became like, I was like, like, come on, like, go for it. I don't give a shit. I'm fine. Like I started to realize like this is kind of the name of the game, is like to be as impervious as you can to that, to being rejected. So yeah, as I say, I wasn't trying to fail, but I was just like looking at it as an inevitability to some degree. Not that it was inevitable in all cases, but that like this will and should happen quite regularly, and embrace that part of it and make that part of the process. And so it didn't really feel like a failure. It felt like, I don't know, a different word that we don't have. And in a way there should be two words, I think, for failure, because there's like failure where you've really, you failed like in a way that shouldn't be expected, that you shouldn't accept, and that isn't a good thing, and that is a real failure. And then there's the kind of failure that's like, that's how you improve and do things and grow and achieve things. For example, when you do strength training, when you lift weights, we refer to it as training to failure. When you train to a point where like you can't lift the weight again, you've trained to failure, but you haven't failed. It's not or it depends on your definition of the word failure, but what you've done is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. What you've done then by training to failure is a really good thing, and you're making yourself stronger, and by being willing to go through that pain, you're gaining something. And I think that fear of failure is one of the most paralyzing things for people, and something that holds a lot of people back from achieving their true potential and doing the things that they could be good at, or things that they might enjoy, or things that they deep down want to do, but they're afraid of failure. And it gets dressed up in a lot of other ways, but I think that's like one of the most, it's one of the reasons I think people just settle into whatever the easiest thing is to do in life, and then they kind of numb the pain or boredom with like alcohol or food or TV or the internet, and they just don't think about it. They just like, shut their minds off and kind of avoid it because it's potentially painful. And I've been lucky in some ways, I think, but like things I've done that I've failed at a lot, I've not had in my own mind, I've not had a choice. Like in pursuing music, I've failed a lot and been rejected a lot, and I never fully got used to that or got over it. It really hurt a lot. But I had a kind of like religious fervor in me, like I have to do this. This isn't like a choice. This is just a thing that I just feel like just deeply compelled to do. It's like a sort of act of faith or something, and so I don't again, I sort of was like, okay, basically what's going to happen is going to happen. It's not really something in my control. It's not something I can shirk away from or whatever. And in a sense, I feel lucky to have that, although in a sense that's how I viewed things. That was my perspective. So I guess that was something that I can credit myself for in a way. You know, it's not just a thing that I was like given necessarily. I don't know. Depends on how you look at it. But it I don't think it was just, I think it was just how I viewed life in a way. Socially, I think that failure like is a very broad term, and in the context of what I'm talking about in this video, I think it's like really important to look at it as broadly as possible. So failure could be like, losing your job, or like just being bankrupt, or failure could be someone not laughing at a joke that you tell at work, or wearing something that looks ridiculous, you know, and it being perceived as such. So like I did have that fear of failure growing up. Like everyone has it. You have to have it. It's normal, and you wouldn't really be like human if you didn't have that. But you have to override it. You have to supersede it. You have to like, you know, overcome this fear of failure and accept that it's a kind of non-negotiable part of whatever it is that you're trying to do. So like growing up, like I was pretty weird and a lot of people didn't like me, and that it's not to say that was good. Like it was good that it was good that I was like that. Like in a lot of ways I think I was like a bit of a dick, but I was afraid to fail, but I didn't allow my fear of failure to stop me from persisting in trying to figure out who I was, trying to be myself, trying to continuously try out new ways of being and kind of follow my impulses, which often were very bad impulses, and often were, I think, probably just mentally ill kind of impulses, or impulses that were born out of extreme stress or anxiety, or insecurity. But I felt like it's very. I had an innate feeling that it was important that my behaviour wasn't dictated by the opinion of others. And whilst in my case that didn't always turn out well, it wasn't always a good thing that I was like that. And in some ways, maybe it was like a kind of arrogance or a bad quality. I do think that feeling, looking straight ahead at what it is you're trying to do and not allowing the setbacks or the rejections or the failures or the bad things that come your way as a result of it to stop you from doing it. And I think that's a thing that, like, if that could be taught to people more and harnessed more, would be very powerful. I know, for example, like again in terms of external success, like I'm definitely not a successful person in life, and most people I think would prefer to have things that I don't have. Like most people would prefer to, for example, have like more money than me and just be, you know, whatever. Like there's lots of things like I don't think that by society standards, like I don't think that I'm a model for success, but in specific areas, I've been successful in doing what I want to do. It doesn't mean that it's produced positive or externally successful outcomes, certainly in terms of like financial reward or anything like that. But I have been successful in doing the things that I've wanted to do in ways that I've seen a lot of other people struggle. Like I've seen people want to do like videos, for example. It's not, I mean, doing YouTube is not the most difficult thing in the world. It's not as difficult as like doing like open mics, or being in front of crowds or whatever. Like, generally speaking, like I don't personally perceive this as like an enormously difficult thing to do, but it is. Well, it depends. Actually, for me, it's easy to say that because I don't really have any like connections to the world, to be honest. So it's not like I can be like embarrassed, or like I don't really have a like I lose my job or something. I don't know. It just, for me, it's not, to me, I don't see any downsides to it, but I do understand that for other people that's different. But I think for a lot of people, what really scares them anyway in doing something like this is like, my videos will be shit. My videos will be shit. I don't know what happened to my pronunciation there. My videos will be shit. My people won't like them. Someone will say bad things about me. I will like look bad. There could be some kind of consequences. No one will watch them. Whatever it is, there's all these different things, and all of these things, rather than being valid reasons not to do something, are excuses that we make when we're afraid of failing at something. Because for most people, the time and effort that it takes to do something like this, like to, for example, to just engage in some kind of creative pursuit or make videos or like put their thoughts out there, it's fairly minimal in terms of, what else are you doing? I understand if you've got like kids and stuff and you're like, yeah, I just don't have time to do these things and whatever. That's completely understandable. But for most of us, what else are you going to be doing? Watching TV? You might as well just fucking try it. Like, who cares? It doesn't matter. You're really not losing anything apart from a bit of time you probably would have spent like looking at fucking YouTube shorts. So there's very little that you can lose, and I think generally it's always better to try and condition your brain to think of why you should do something rather than why you shouldn't. Case in point, like to go back to the thing about me trying to approach women, I could be like, oh, she'll reject me and like I'll feel shame. Which did happen, and I could be like, I shouldn't do it because of that. But it's easier in that capacity to think, because to be honest, like biologically, your body is also telling you like, I want to. And I wasn't at that stage. I wasn't trying to just like sleep with women. I was actually like, by that point in my life, I think I kind of grown out of that mentality. I didn't really want to just like sleep with random women. I did actually want to like date women, but of course, when you date women, you also want to sleep with them. Like, you're attracted to the opposite sex. So biologically, that helps, because even if your brain's telling you no, like your body is like, I want to speak to her. I want to date this woman, and so in that with that particular example, it's kind of easier because you're kind of constantly reminded of the reason why you should do this. But with other things, you might have to tell yourself more. If it comes to making like videos or doing some creative project or doing something, you might have to say to yourself, I should do this because I might connect with other people and that would be really good. It might be cathartic for me, which it is, by the way. I might in doing it, I might accidentally discover other things that I like, which does happen. It will just occupy my time in a way that's like better than a lot of the other things I'm doing with my time. There's all these reasons you can come up with why you should do something. But often our brain by default comes up with reasons why we shouldn't do things. To go back, by the way, what happened when I was trying to approach all these women and stuff, I just remembered as well, actually, I had one really bad experience. I approached a woman and I don't remember exactly what happened. She was in the town centre, it was busy and a lot of people around, and I was like, right, better get my one in for the day. And she wasn't super attractive or anything, to be honest. And I approached her and I something very awkward happened immediately. I don't remember, it was like she wasn't sure I was talking to her, and I sort of stopped midway through my sentence, and then I got confused because I was like, sometimes when this would happen, I'd be like, I would be speaking to women who like were also foreign, so we could speak in English, but then sometimes I was speaking in like broken Spanish, and this was one of those interactions. I was speaking in broken Spanish, and I remember she was like looked at me like, what? And I was like, sorry, and I just like got into a weird panic and walked off. And I was like, oh, Jesus, that was really embarrassing. And I thought, I can count that, though. Even though I didn't, like, officially get rejected, I was like, no, I can count that as one because that was really embarrassing. And I walked off and I went and started doing some other shit, and then I went to the supermarket. And then they have these long in the supermarket here, Mercadona, in that particular one in the city centre. They have these long escalators, like the flat ones, not the ones with stairs. And you go up and down it on your trolley, and it's really long and really slow. So that as you're going up, you pass the people that are coming down. Anyway, I was going up. I'd been on the bottom floor, and I was going up to go and like pay for my shit. And I saw this woman again, and she was with her boyfriend, and he was like this massive dude, and he'd obviously just been at like the gym. He had like a vest on and shit. he was huge, and I work out and stuff, like, but I'm not that big, He looked kind of roided up, to be fair. He was like massive, and he was, to be honest, she was punching a bit. Like, I don't know what was going on there. He was pretty good looking and like a big guy and stuff, and she was like holding on to him and looking at me and telling him something and like crying, laughing and looking at me, and I was slowly going it was like a humiliation simulator. Like, I was slowly going up and I was just looking across, like holding my trolley, and just bright red with embarrassment and it kind of anger as well. I was pretty angry as well, but it's like, I had to kind of quash that as well, because it's like, well, what am I going to do, And she was just like pissing herself laughing at me, like she was trying to, like she kind of couldn't contain her amusement, and he was just like, I guess to some degree in on the joke. She'd obviously told him like who I was or whatever, and he was just kind of smirking a bit. They were both looking at me, and I was like just carried on going up, and I was dressed like a fucking douche as well. Like, I was wearing like a really tight shirt, and I felt like really silly. I felt terrible. I felt like really, really bad. And when I got up to the top, to the other floor, and they'd gone down, it was, as I say, a mixture of like extreme embarrassment and anger. I was annoyed because I thought, like, I didn't do anything to her. I wasn't mean to her. I wasn't rude. I was perfectly polite. I said, all right, sorry, and walked off, after the interaction was confusing. So it was very mean, bullyish behaviour, and I felt like a bit, coming from her, to be honest, it was a little bit. If she'd been like really hot, I would have been like, okay, this is just this sort of weird divine right bestowed upon hot people to look at the rest of all of us like we're medieval peasants. But like, to be honest, love, like, this fucking situation isn't going to last with you two, and laugh it up, basically, because in about 5 or 6 years it's going to be rough. But I was pretty angry, and it's very humiliating, and I had a lot of experiences like that. And but it was worth it in a weird way. It was worth it in a sense, because basically very soon after that we got this dog, and I got a dog, and the dog just really didn't like it when me and my at the time ex, my now again basically wife. I mean, we're not officially married yet, but we're basically married. She didn't like it when we weren't together, because we were still hanging out a little bit, and I would bring the dog to hers, and the dog would refuse to leave, and didn't want to leave her place. And then when she would come around to mine and would leave, like, the dog would get really upset, and the dog just loved it when we were together, and like we both really loved the dog, and I couldn't really adopt the dog on my own either, and I really wanted to adopt it, and it just, basically, the dog just brought us closer together. It was quite amazing, to be honest, but the dog just sort of brought us closer together, and we couldn't really fight when the dog was there, because we didn't want to like upset her, so it kind of solved all of our problems, to be honest. Like, I don't know what's going to happen when the dog dies. Like, we joke about it a lot, like, we're probably just going to kill ourselves when the dog dies. We're not going to kill ourselves. We would never do that, but I don't know, it's hard to imagine life without this dog, and she really brought us back together, and like, it was a really good thing. So anyway, that all happened, and I'm in a weird, mildly embarrassing way, I'm kind of glad I didn't have like much success with women during that period, or really any, I guess. But I was kind of glad that during this short period, I felt like on a personal level, I conquered this it didn't defeat me, basically, this failure and this fear of rejection and all of this. It didn't defeat me. and I developed a system, and I kind of overcame it. And had that gone on for a couple more years, I had other problems to sort out. I think like when I did go on dates with people, I needed to just like relax and have a laugh or whatever, and I couldn't. I was too uptight and stressed and doing all this weird. I was doing like fucking semen retention and all this weird shit, and I was going a bit nuts, and I was like super tense, and I was developing a bit of a weird persona, like to try and cope with the world and everything that was going on. So I wasn't able to just like chill out and be relaxed, and had that gone on for a longer period of time, I think that would have come eventually, you know. And so this strategy I kind of devised, I think would have been very very successful. Well, successful more than just, you know, more than approaching things with a kind of failure fearing mindset. But anyway, we're back together now, and things are great. So back to what I was saying. Yeah, so my girlfriend, for example, like she there's loads of things she wants to do, and she's always like got this super negative mindset. Like she's always got these ideas of why she shouldn't do things, and it's definitely getting better now. I think partially being around me, to be honest, like, but because I'm always sort of saying, like, you know, you shouldn't think of it like that. Like, you shouldn't constantly think of the downsides of doing things. And even stuff like exercise, like people do it about stuff like exercise, which is like, you shouldn't really be afraid of, you know, you should just exercise. It's not really a thing that you need to be, but there's a lot of fear of failure built into that. And if I think back to before I used to exercise at all, I can remember it, like, because I would have just been embarrassed to be in a gym, because I would have been like, I will do it wrong, and other men will laugh at me and look at me like I'm weak, and I'll feel bad about myself, and so I just won't go to the gym. And I actually did. I developed like an idea of like going to the gym is fucking, you know, whatever. Like what, it's stuff you can't say on YouTube. But basically, I had all these ideas about what men who went to the gym were, and like that, you know, men don't need to do that and stuff, and all of these ideas. And in reality, it was because, I was embarrassed that I'd like, I don't go to the gym now anymore. I work out like at home and do it myself. But the point being, I was embarrassed I would do things wrong, that I would have to actually accept that I was weak and out of shape and fat, you know. And I didn't want to like look at my body, and I didn't want to think about it, and I didn't want to be confronted with how weak I was. So I made myself weaker, and I came up with reasons to be weak. I came up with excuses for my own weakness. And that's a very toxic thing to do. And a lot of people do that. And it can manifest itself in really surprising ways, like less obvious ways than that. You know, like it can come out in really, really weird ways. It can come out in people's political views. It can come out in people's social tendencies. It comes out in all sorts of odd ways, like things people refuse to do or engage with. And so much of the time, like deep down, they're just afraid to fail, basically. And yeah, I mean, socially, it's a big one for people. And it can even be afraid, not just that you will fail personally or that you will be rejected, but fear that something will fail. Like, people very often don't want to tell each other how they really feel. And I've started trying, recently I've been trying more just to do this. I always kind of did, but like all of these things that I feel probably I'm above average at dealing with mentally, they're still really difficult for me. Like, I'm still really afraid of people thinking badly of me, or like being rejected, or whatever. I'm probably a bit less afraid of those things than the average person, but they're just, to all people, I think those things are like really scary. But I'm trying now, you know, sometimes you think of things you want to say to like a family member, and you're like, they're just going to think that's cringe and weird, and there's not really an appropriate moment to say it. I'm trying now to just do it. And usually what happens is like, you don't get like this, you know, you're not met with this like embrace of a reaction where, you know, and depending on who the person is, like where you're immediately validated and reassured that it was the right thing to do. But you sort of accept that and go, yeah, people don't really communicate that directly, even if whether or not they do or don't feel that, you know, people don't really communicate that directly, and they're often a bit more like they don't really know how to react to certain things. But you know that you've done it. You know that you've done what you think deep down you should do, what you really believe is the right thing to do, or what you really kind of want to do. you've done it. And I do think generally, yeah, like especially if someone is like really unhappy, and you want to tell them something good or something, something nice about them, or try to like reassure someone or support them, you can feel embarrassed to do it, but it often affects people more than you realize. Like it can be more of a positive thing for people than you realize. But often part of feeling that way in the first place, is that they don't know how to interpret things or express things or deal with things. And I've had, for example, someone I know who has had like a lot of problems in his life, and I've always tried to give this person sort of suggestions and advice, and he'd often would be like, fuck off, and not in a serious, in more of a jokey way, but kind of like, nah, shut up, whatever. And then like a few months later, this person, without fail, would like take on board this advice and do this thing, whether it was like quitting porn or not that I've been like completely successful in that, honestly, but I try sort of, but like things like that, or using the internet less, or not engaging in these like horrible random like sort of cheap relationships, or not even relationship, like just not engaging with these like horrible situations, like dating and stuff, or trying to just be more outgoing or whatever, all of these things. And this person would like be like, whatever, and like kind of argue with me if I'd mention any of it, or just get defensive. And then like a month or two later, without fail, they would like start doing this thing, and they would this person acts like I never said it. Like this person would be like, nah, it's fine to look at porn all the time, who gives a shit, fuck you, or whatever. And I was like, all right, I'm just suggesting it might not be like, helping your current situation. And then suddenly a couple of months later, this person's like, yeah, like, porn's bad or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll just pretend we didn't discuss this 2 months ago. But people can interpret things in funny ways, basically, and like they don't always give you the response that you ideally would like, or a validating response that immediately confirms to you that what you've done is the right thing. But if you're doing the right thing, you'll kind of know deep down that you're doing the right thing anyway, and it shouldn't be dependent on external validation. That should come from within. And when you have that certainty in what you're doing, the external validation, or the lack of external validation, is just like a kind of a setback, or a mild downside, or just part of the process. And it can't change you. It can't alter your course. Of course, your course should be altered by like real consequences. You shouldn't just blindly do things, even if they're like a bad idea. But there's a difference between something being a bad idea and you being afraid of it. Like those are two very different things. And yeah, more generally, like failure, I just think is it doesn't just teach you about the thing that you're failing at. Like, I did some videos before about doing my driving exam, and I kept failing it. I failed it 5 times, I think. I failed it 5 times, and I passed on the 6th time. But it wasn't just the driving exam I was failing. I was failing in the classes, because I was having these bad experiences and getting like shouted at in a foreign language, and just horrible. I hated it. It was really bad. Actually, honestly, like one of the most difficult things I've had to do. I don't know why. I think just because of my personality, it just like I really hated it. I like to just do exactly what I want to do, which is probably partially why I've had to some degree overcome this fear of failure. Because I want to do what I want to do. I don't want to do what is made easy or what is facilitated for me by life. I kind of just I have specific things I want to do, and I want to do them. So having to be at a certain place at a certain time, to sit with a certain person and be told to do certain things, it was really like seriously bothering me, and kind of like triggering a lot of sort of weird mental problems in me, and just very stressful. And also I spent all my money. It was horrible. I hated it. Basically everything I had in the bank was gone, and I'm now fairly destitute and poor. I don't actually know what destitute means. I just know that word usually goes with poor, so I don't know. But yeah, anyway, it was a very bad experience. But failing at that was in hindsight, it was cool in a lot of ways. Like every time I failed at that, I'd go home and I'd get into like a really bad mood, and then I'd be like, right, well, now this has to mean something. It has to count for something. I have to do something. Like I have to get something from this experience. So I would then work much harder at things I was working on. There was a project I was working on at the time to try and grow some passive income. And every time I failed a driving exam, I would go from very lazily, half-assedly kind of approaching this thing to be like, right, I have to work on this project now. This at least has to work out. And it kind of has worked out. And now I'm making like, it's growing all the time. I'm making like 100, 150 euros a month from this thing, like passively, and it's kind of constantly growing. And in the long run, over 5 or 10 years, that will probably amount to a lot more than I lost learning to drive. And the push that failing gave me was pretty powerful. And not just the push, but it pushed me gave me motivation, to do other things. And sometimes it does the opposite. Sometimes it can demotivate you, and sometimes it made me not want to work out and not want to do things. And I just felt depressed, and I just wanted to play fucking computer games or whatever. But in other ways, it can, if you allow it to, and if you embrace it in the right way. And I wish sometimes I had, I guess sometimes I wish I had and I don't say this in a sense of feeling entitled to it. I don't think that this is the norm or that everybody has this, but I think it'd be really cool to have I guess what I'm referring to really is like a dad I could talk to a bit more, or someone equivalent, someone to there aren't really many people I know that are like younger than me, or like kind of beneath me socially, or that look up to me in any way. But if there ever are, I try to like encourage people, and I really enjoy that, like taking just being an active part of someone else's kind of like journey through life or whatever. And I really enjoy that, and I feel I'm like good at it. And I sometimes I wish I think, for example, like it would be really good if kids were taught more, like some kids have dads who are super involved, and they're like, they do kind of teach them about stuff like this when they're kids. I think that's quite rare, but I know like when I have kids, like they won't, at least if I can help it, like they won't be perturbed by failure, and they won't be, and they'll have kind of mental strategies, or they'll have reference points at least, for ways they can approach situations apart from just the kind of standard like kind of fear mindset that most of us have. But it's hard to maintain that yourself, and it would be cool. I wish I had more of that, I wish like I think we can push each other a lot in that regard, and I think that although I was able to take a lot of these failures learning to drive and use them to do other things, it would have been cool to have someone who was similarly minded echoing back to me a lot of these things, and I think it's a good thing we can do for each other. And I think like strategizing and or maneuvering through the different ups and downs mentally in life is like the biggest sort of battle that we face overall collectively. And I think it's a thing that's really good to do together and to work on together and to help each other through. And we don't really do much of that, I don't think. There's certain corners of the internet where people do, and I think that's really good. I think it's one of the best things about the internet. Like there's a lot of people trying to like motivate each other and encourage each other and support each other through letdowns and disappointments and stuff. And my dad's like in his mid-70s. I don't really. It's different generation. I just mean as in someone who is in a similar line of work to me, or someone who is an older sibling, or someone who whatever. I think it's good to have that. Like if you have that, I think it's a good thing, and I think it can. I think it can help a lot in life. And I think, to be honest, sometimes I've tried to be what I wish I had. I've tried to sort of be that because yeah, it feels lonely sometimes, you know, when things don't work out, they go badly. It's good in a way that you're forced to deal with it on your own, but sometimes I think it's cool for someone to have that input in someone else's life, and to not always like coach yourself, and it's a thing I often kind of envy about people who do like sports for a living. Like I look at a lot of football related stuff, and I'm often more interested in what happens around football, around the game of football, rather than the game itself. The managers, particularly managers, I find managers very interesting. The managers, the team dynamics, the captains, all of this shit, and how people deal with each other and motivate each other and help each other. And I think that's a really amazing thing that they have in football that we don't really have in normal life. You know, you're not like a team. Even if you're on a team at work, a lot of the time you're competing and you just sort of don't really like each other. But in a good football team with good management and a good culture, not like Manchester United, you know, where everything is like toxic and horrible, but like a good culture, that's what people are doing. I'm sure there are some people doing this at Manchester United anyway, but that's what people are doing. They're kind of like helping each other through things and helping each other navigate setbacks and navigate failure. And to them, to like athletes and people who are very high achievers, failure is just a thing that is accepted. I mean, they hate it, like generally, like they hate to lose, they hate to fail, but it's like that is part of their job. Being able to deal with that and continue and persevere is kind of their job. And if they weren't able to do that, they wouldn't have, most of the time, unless they're absurdly naturally gifted, they wouldn't have succeeded. So they have to kind of embrace it to some degree. Even if they hate it, they have to embrace the fact that they hate it and find ways of dealing with that and find ways to make sure it doesn't happen again, and, you know, whatever. And yeah, it's a cool thing to have. Anyway, so I would have these experiences. I would keep failing the exam and getting like very unhappy. And not only would it push me in a direct, more tangible way, but I think honestly, like, bad experiences, failures, low points in your life, in whatever form they come in, I think they help you get to know yourself, because they take away artifices. Like they take away, like, for example, if I had like passed, I would have been like, I would have been like, oh, I passed, and that would have become my source of self-esteem. Like, similarly, right, if I was like really good looking, and when I was younger, like, just like, because when I was like, well, for a long time, but particularly from a teenager onwards, like, I was like really obsessed with girls, like big time. Like I really, it was very important to me, you know. And had I grown and then become like, as I gotten older, if I'd become like very tall and good looking and stuff, and it become very easy for me to get girls, like, I don't know, God knows where my life would have gone, because I could have depended on that for self-esteem, and I might not have had to have internalized things and thought about things and got to know myself and talked to myself. And I don't know if you compare the two, like, you know, sleeping with lots of beautiful women, or internalizing things and talking to yourself. Most people would probably choose the former. I'd love to be like that guy, talking to myself. You know what I mean, though? Like, it's an oversimplification, but I'm saying that, like, if my self-esteem had come in other ways, in more easily accessible and it more probably immediately desirable ways, there would have been less development in other areas, and areas that I think are probably more sustainable and get you through life. Because you do see, to be fair, like, some sort of like hot popular people, like, at a certain point in life, you can see some of them get a bit fucked up, where like they don't know what's going on anymore, and they don't really know how to be anything other than like a hot popular person, and they're sort of like a bit simple sometimes, you know. And sorry, I don't know if you can hear that call that's going on next door, but basically, what was I saying? Yeah, so when these things would happen, if I'd like, for example, passed first time, in the short term, that would have given me a self-esteem boost and a lot of happiness, and I would have been like, oh great, and then I would have taken some pride in that, and instead, when you fail at something, like when I failed at that, I had to say to myself, okay, so I don't have that. What do I have? And this wasn't a conscious process, but it's just what happens. If things get stripped away from you, it's the same if you lose all your material possessions. You have to go, okay, well, what am I? What do I have left? It just inevitably makes you ask that question. It's not even like an active, conscious, deliberate process. It just happens. So whenever this would happen, I would have to think like, okay, well, what's next? What do I do now? What do I have? And every time that happened, because it happened a lot of times, clearly, every time it happened, I would have to do that more, and I'd have to dig deeper, and I'd have to find more things. And I did get to a point I was like, I think I've found enough other things now. Like, I would really like to, stop spending money on this and to be able to drive. And it's amazing now. I'm driving around everywhere now. It's fucking amazing. I absolutely love it. Although, obviously, there's all like the car stress, which I knew in the back of my mind would be a thing, but you just sort of don't care. You're just like, I want a car. I just want to be able to drive. And it's because where I live is so remote. Like, there's not even a shop where I live. There's literally not a shop. So I have to drive just to even go to like a convenience store. It's pretty crazy. So it was very difficult to live without a car, obviously. And to go to like supermarkets and shit and it was really quite difficult. And now, if I need to take the dog to the vet, whatever, it's fucking amazing. But yeah, there's all that car stress bullshit. But anyway, so it kept forcing me to find other things and other ways and to think about things differently and to also, like, I haven't been able to rely on external success for my self-esteem. And I think that's been really good for me. Again, like, you might meet people, like hot people, or even just people who are just kind of like, normal or whatever, and they just kind of like, whatever. You can see sometimes that their self-esteem is quite fragile. Like, it's quite, it's not necessarily very deep self-esteem. It's built on quite shaky ground. I mean, it's built on ground that a bad accident can just take away. It's not like it's built on something even like a bad haircut can take away. And that's not really self-esteem, I don't think. It's not it's not really enough, and I think self-esteem is not I'm attractive. I think self-esteem is like I like myself regardless, and I'm confident in myself regardless, And so if someone is attractive, like, then they're just confident in themselves regardless. But if they lose that, or that goes away, they don't lose themselves, And so I think, sometimes not achieving or having the things that you might immediately want, or failing at things, can help with that as well. It can help you to develop deeper, more meaningful things that it's similar to, I guess, in like a lot of Zen philosophy and stuff, like material things. If you don't have them, you're forced to find something else, and sometimes maybe the things that you find are deeper and more meaningful than any material possession could ever be. I'm certainly not there yet. Like, I don't want to sit around meditating all day, honestly. Like, and I'm not that drawn to the idea of being like super Zen and whatever, and not caring about anything or wanting anything. But clearly, for some people, it has an enormous value, and some of that comes from the things that you might want that you don't have, or that you deliberately maybe choose not to have. But anyway, I think it's really important to root out fear of failure. If you're afraid genuinely of the consequences of doing something, like, if I do this, I might, if I do this, there's a strong possibility that I will destroy my finances and fuck up my future, and like, won't have somewhere stable to live, then that's probably, it's important to be aware of that and to think about that, and maybe you shouldn't do that thing. I think it's stupid when people are like, just follow your dreams, do whatever you want. You shouldn't. You should definitely think about the consequences, 100%. Like, and sometimes you genuinely have to weigh those up, particularly if you have a family or people dependent on you. Sometimes you just have to be like, I know there'll come a time in my life, like when we've got kids, when like, hopefully I can still do the things I want to do, But there will come a point where it's like, okay, I just have to do other stuff that's more, appropriate for having a family, basically. I can't just do whatever I want for my whole life. But now I can. Right now I can. And it'd be a real fucking shame to let, like, fear of people looking down on me or like anything like that, like any sort of superficial, relatively meaningless thing to stop me from doing things that I care about or that I want to do or that are important to me. And I hope that this is in any way useful for anyone, basically, in that regard. And I it's a thing I wish people were taught about more and told more and encouraged more in that regard. Just to do what you think is the right thing to do, and to as I say, to root out that, like, is this why am I not doing this? Why do I not want to do this? Is this just a fear of failure? Is that really what's going on here? As I said, if there's something larger and more important that's stopping you, then maybe that's worth considering. But is it really that? Or am I just afraid of the bad feelings that will come with this not going well, or with some minor sort of bad consequence of it? And even socially, am I being this way because I want to be this way socially? Am I being this way because this is who I am and because I think this is the best way to be? Or am I being this way because I'm being risk averse and because I want people to like me and I want to fit in and I don't want anyone at work to think I'm weird or whatever? And on that, socially, I mean, I'm not super outgoing socially. Like, my girlfriend, one of the things I always really liked and respected about her, and still do, is that she, at a certain point, I think she was getting bullied quite a lot at work, and she's a fairly weird person, and she was getting, like, kind of, I guess, like, bullied and rejected quite a lot, and a lot of the sort of, like, popular girls would kind of, like, round on her, and I think this is a bit of an experience she had at school. And then at a certain point, she just was like, fuck it, and she just started doing whatever she wanted to do. Not being a dick to people, but just, well, sometimes a little bit, a bit annoying. But no, in a good way, in a really admirable way. Like, she just would be like, okay, I'm just going to, like, tell the jokes that I think are funny and do things that I think are cool and have a good time and enjoy my own, like, wacky sense of humor and enjoy, say things, even if people look down on me or judge me, just say the truth, talk about who I am or whatever. And so she just at a certain point started doing this, which is a very difficult thing to do. I mean, it really, like, takes a lot of courage that, like, I haven't developed yet personally to do this. And would just, like, she would just be completely herself. Like, she would just be like, or not even completely herself, but she would just be how she wanted to be at work. Basically, she sort of stopped allowing the fear to guide her, because I think she faced all of those consequences. She had faced the rejection, she'd faced the bullying, she'd faced the, all of that stuff, the shame and everything. So at a certain point, it was like, all right, what are you going to do to me, really? A bit like how someone who's a trained fighter, like, they sort of stop being afraid of being punched in the face, whereas to a normal person, being punched in the face is, like, terrifying. The thought of being punched in the face is really enough to, like, stop you doing certain things. But to someone who's been punched in the face 10,000 times, they're like, I don't give a shit, And I think it was a bit like that. And so she just started being this way, and then over time, people started to really like her, basically. And she, not always, but, like, at most jobs she's had since then, she's been, like, the most popular person, which is kind of ironic, because it was born out of being very unpopular and people not liking her, and it ended up becoming, sometimes I think maybe, like, some people it rubs up the wrong way, and definitely, like, but in more of a way in terms of, like, maybe it's, like, for some people it's just a bit irritating or whatever, but generally speaking, like, people really like her, and more importantly, the people that she does become friends with, they're getting a more accurate version of her. They're not developing a fake friendship based on someone fearfully being what they think they're supposed to be, because it's very hard to develop a sincere friendship with someone who's only behaving a certain way because they don't want you to look down on them. So when someone is completely themselves, you can either go, all right, I fucking don't like this person, I don't want to talk to them, or you can be like, oh, this person's great, and I feel a bit less afraid myself to be myself around them, so now we can develop, like, a good rapport and a good relationship. And I think it's really good, like, to polarize people, to not be afraid of that rejection, or failure, and to be ready to polarize people, to go, yeah, a certain amount of people are going to fucking hate me, but the people who don't will probably really appreciate that I'm being like this, and I'll get to know them more and have deeper relationships with people and feel more in touch with myself. So yeah, that's all really. That's my overall those are my feelings on the subject. There might be more stuff I forgot to mention. It's a fairly big topic, failure. As I said, it's a very broad term, like that can be used in so many different ways, but that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope this was useful in any way, and hope you're all well. Take care.